Hello, Whovians, and welcome to another episode of the greatest place you'll ever hear Doctor Who content, Doctor Who discussions. And today I'm here with a very special guest who is best known for doing the documentaries for the brand new Blu-ray box sets and to write for Big Finish, the one, the only, Chris Chapman.
Hey, what an introduction. Thank you, Thomas. Very happy to be here.
You're welcome. Now, for people that might not know who you are, would you be able to give them a brief overview of who you are?
Sure. That's a good soul-searching question to start with, isn't it? The main thing I do is I make documentaries, and I do that mostly for telly, for the BBC. But I've had a sideline, I guess, for the last really kind of 11 or 12 years of making documentaries for the Doctor Who releases. Originally, special features for DVD. So we used to do things like Who Peter and Haydock versus Havoc and Living with Levine and lots of the making ofs and so on. And then it stopped for a while. And then we released these beautiful Blu-ray box sets. And now I do making of and special documentaries for those. So we've done stuff like we did Showman, The Life of John Nathan Turner, and Our Sarah Jane about Elizabeth Sladen. And we've done more with Toby Haydock. We did Weekend with Waterhouse and the Doctor Who cookbook and Looking for Lenny and things. And recently we did one with Frank Skinner called Terence and Me that was a tribute to Terence Dix. So there's that whole side of what I do. And then also through those people, really in a really corrupt way, through the people I've met making those documentaries, I got a chance to pitch to Big Finish and say, hey, I write short films. Could I write some Doctor Who for you? And I've done about 10 releases for them from, I think we started with The Memory Bank and The Middle and Scorched Earth and Iron Bright and Apply to the Pimpernel for Colin. And I've also done, Memory Bank for Peter. And I've also done Warzone for Peter and Host of the Wirren for the unit set and The Friendly Invasion with Tom, which isn't quite out yet. So no, it's good fun. Here's my toddler, by the way. This is like that bit in the TV, in the news thing when the kids come in and behind, hello, Edie, do you want to come and say hello to Tom? Hello.
Hello.
I think you're on the internet. You're going to say hello to Doctor Who fans? You going to wave? You can sit in if you like it. You can sit in as long as you're well behaved. Yes, Tom, so that's me.
And so now we're going to go a little bit further back. Now, when did you first see Doctor Who and how did you get into it?
So this all begins for me. I'm probably one of the tail enders, I think, in terms of the original series, that I started watching Trial of a Time Lord. So I guess 86, I would have been 5 and have vague memories of that. And then big fat memories of watching Remembrance of the Daleks. I don't have a lot of memories of season 24. I don't know if my parents just decided they hated the look of it or maybe had a weird distaste for Bonnie Langford. I love Bonnie, but I don't know if my parents liked it. And so Remembrance of the Daleks, at school, we used to play around the outside sheds and the mobiles. We would pretend to be a Dalek, an ace with a baseball bat, and the Doctor. And when people say the show wasn't popular in 87, actually this would be in 88. Actually, for us, age 7, it was still a big deal. And then I kind of then it disappeared. It wasn't on telly. When I was ready to spend the rest of my life watching it, it just kind of vanished after the survival. And it took the BBC Two repeats in the early 90s and the VHSs for me to get kind of back into it. And yeah, it kind of went from there. I've always, I think for a lot of us, Tom, it's that feeling of a lot of us who felt a bit odd or isolated or different when we were young, saw the Doctor as this kind of, blimey, this is a person who's different and strange, but that's great, and they have adventures, and being different is not a bad thing, is a great thing. And so I think it was a real inspiration for me at that point. And I used to write Doctor Who stories. I remember writing a sequel to Curse of Fenric in my exercise book that was like set after the war, and Fenric had somehow got back to London in the kind of ruin of the Blitz in kind of 1950 or so. And I remember writing that, and I remember writing a sequel to Terror of the Autons just because I really liked the Autons. I was just obsessed with Terror of the Autons. And So it started like a lot of people started, that you're a fan first and foremost, and then everything else kind of comes after that, really. Ooh, yeah, that's a mirror. You see, that's a mirror.
And it's a similar thing for me. Is that when I was in primary school, I used to run around and pretend I was Matt Smith, and I don't think it's very like safe to do it, but I used to put my ear against the floor, and the floor's like very dirty.
Yes.
Thinking I was listening to the floor, thinking I'm.
but that's how it starts. It's that kind of imaginative approach to being a fan of something. Ooh, excuse me. Let's just put this over here. I think that's how it begins. And if you spoke to any creative who's worked on Doctor Who, I'm sure your Stephen Moffats and the Russell T Davises would have had a moment as a child. Yeah. So I empathise with you listening to the floor and so on, because it is. I don't think classmates know quite what to do with that stuff after a while. And I was one of those kids who I think I got to 11 or 12 and I thought, I don't really want to stop being a kid. I still want to do those things and I still loved Doctor Who and Transformers and things like that. And all the other kids at school had decided they were too cool for anything else and just wanted to stand around and not play anymore. And I felt really a bit alien at that point. And it took a while for me to realize, as the Doctor would say, that there's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish, that you do get a chance to rediscover publicly that childhood, because as nerds, we fill our houses now with toys, basically. and I would say, actually, from my point of view, working, I play. I go out and I make films, and I'm playing and I'm making believe, and I'm it's pure imagination in that sense. So anybody that tells you when you're 12 that you need to grow up doesn't really understand what being a grown-up is, I'd say.
Yeah, well, I was around when Doctor Who started to come back as a big like thing, when it was all Matt Smith and everyone had all the trading cards, and you couldn't get anywhere without seeing all the trading cards. So it was, and then it all just like vanished. It was there. It was like, ooh, and then it went, ooh.
I know. I can't imagine what it would have been like if you were a kid in like 2006 or 2007, when suddenly you had Doctor Who and Torchwood, and Sarah Jane was on its way, and you had Confidential and Totally Doctor Who. And, there have been these feast and famine moments with Doctor Who when it does go quiet, and then suddenly it's everywhere again for another generation. So I think we're probably in a slightly, partly because I don't think Cardiff like making a lot of publicity noise and so on. We're in a quieter time at the moment, but I'm sure that will change again.
Yeah, and what's quite good about when Doctor Who trying with Russell T Davies, it was you had different episodes, different type of series for different age groups. What was rather, I don't know if you know about this, but what was rather funny, they accidentally showed an episode of Torchwood on CBBC once.
No, they didn't. What?
Because what happened was, CBBC used to end and BBC Three used to begin.
Oh, I see.
They had a logo mishap, so they had to do that. They had to edit the episode to make it more of a family-friendly thing.
well, I mean, you're absolutely right. That I think they did share the same transmission channel, or was it CBeebies?
CBBC ended at 7 and then went on to BBC Three.
Yeah. Oh dear, that could be. You wouldn't want the CBBC crowd watching like Day One or something. You wouldn't, or Countryside or something like that. You don't want that to happen. No. I'm sure Cardiff would have been mortified at that. But we love it when things go wrong. I mean, I always remember, I'm sure everybody does, that moment where in Rose in 2005, when we were all watching, excited that Doctor Who was back, and then Graham Norton starts talking over the top of it, that you get the studio bleed from the Andrew Lloyd Webber series he was doing at the time. Or was it Dance Fever? Maybe it was Dance Fever. So we love it when things go wrong, although it's mortifying at that moment.
Yeah. And so because you were a documentary filmmaker and a writer, this might seem really weird, but I want to know what inspired you to write The Middle.
The Middle. Yes. Good. Well, for anybody who hasn't heard The Middle yet, it's Colin Baker and Flip and Constance, and they arrive on a planet called Formikia, where or a place called Fumiko, I should say, where if you are, well, actually, I shouldn't ruin it actually, because you find out during the course of the story. But it's kind of this idea, seemingly, that the over 70s are being euthanized in this place, that you and that maybe the population is separated and judged and placed and used in accordance with their ages. And I remember at the Big Finish recording day, one of the producers said to me, "Oh, is this based off that Star Trek: The Next Generation episode?" And I'd never heard of it. I can't remember his name, but I think there's an early Next Gen episode which has something about old people being put to a different use when they hit a certain age. I was thinking, I'd been to the zoo, basically. It sounds ridiculous. People say, where do ideas come from? Often they come from really silly places. And I'd literally been to the zoo and been to the insect house and seen a little thing about ants to say, in an ant colony, the older ants are seen as the more expendable because they've lived a life, they've done their duty to the queen. And so they're used then for the more dangerous jobs. And the younger ants who need to grow up and do other things in their lifetime are kind of protected, because you don't want to lose an ant early in its life. And I just thought it was I thought that makes perfect sense. What a logical way to run a society. And so that's the idea for the middle kind of really comes from that. And a little bit of, I think I just lost my grandfather around the same time. And he'd been an incredibly capable, when he died, 94-year-old. And still had a driving license, had still been driving up until the age of 93, which is slightly terrifying by that point. And you know, I know, so it was kind of a love letter to what I knew he was capable of. So a story about, don't underestimate, you know, like any age really. It's a defense of young people and old people and the people in between. So yeah, that was really fun. That was the first 4-part one I'd written for Big Finish, and I was just editing a CBBC show called Our School at the time.
Yeah.
It was like a fly on the wall series set inside different high schools.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that show. I used to, it was on when I was, I think it was like a year before I went to high school. That's
perfect. That's perfect, because that's who it was aimed at. It was exactly aimed at people who are in year 6 to say, here's high school, here's what it's like. And it's, you know, to make it feel a bit less scary. We also made it feel quite mad and dramatic and lots of stuff going on, but hopefully a bit less scary. But no, most of the characters in the middle are named after kids that we filmed in series 3 of Our School. So if anybody's ever seen like the Firth Park series, then people like, there were names like Javonte and Chloe and Janaya and Gaynor. All those character names, really, apart from the middleman. There wasn't a teacher at the school called the middleman, but all of the other characters are named after kids from that year. And I told them that when I went back to film with them again. But I just want to, you know, we'd been filming with them for ages, and I thought I want to do a little tribute to how awesome these kids have been by putting them in Doctor Who.
Wow. I didn't. Wow.
That is the crossover you did not expect today.
Yeah, I did not expect that. Wow. Because when I first heard it, the middle, it was, well, it still is. It's one of the greatest. It reminds me of the Russell T Davies era.
Oh well, thank you.
And it is just incredible. And it's like the opening, it just draws you in from where it begins, and you see how it all changes, and you can just imagine it. And it's what audio dramas do. They let your imagination go wild. And would you ever want to see the middle ever be animated?
Oh, I'd love to see anything happen. No, I mean, we kind of write these things in a little bubble, thinking, you know, I hope somebody hears this, you know, and I'm sure it's been lovely feedback that people have given. You'd love any kind of future for your story, you know, and it must have been amazing if you were Rob Shearman. Or, you know, if you were Rob Shearman back in 2004 and Russell T Davies emails to say, do you want to adapt Jubilee to be the first appearance of the Daleks in the new series? I mean, Rob must have been, I know he was over the moon. And again, then with Paul Cornell getting to take Human Nature from the books and turn that into a season 3 story. I think any of us would be lying if we didn't think it would be amazing to do something with those scripts. I mean, realistically, I have to assume that's not going to happen. But certainly the middle is one of those stories, it would be a budget breaker on telly. You know, it's one that when you're writing it, you're thinking, I can do whatever I like, and I'm going to have geriatrics in robot suits jumping up the outside of giant bits of like towers of glass and all this. And so actually animation would probably be an easier task than live action in that way. But no, I'd love that, Tom. I'd love that.
Because there's like fans online that are now animating different stories because they want to see it happen. And then I think Big Finish have only ever animated one story, I think. Yeah,
but the thing is, they dabble, because some of the missing stories that are now being done, things like Fury from the Deep, were kind of co-productions. Were looked after by part of Big Finish. Gary Russell was working as part of their body to produce those. So they've always dabbled. So it's not. I don't think it's impossible that something like that might happen in the future. But the problem is that all of these Big Finish scripts are written very specifically for audio. So in the middle, there's a lot of people going, "Oh, Doctor, look, there's a big tower over there," and "Oh no, they're coming behind us," and all this kind of thing. And you want to do that in a hopefully not rubbish way. But it is always different to how you would do it. And like if you could see the stuff, you would have scenes that happened without dialogue, because you could just have something happening. But no, it would be. I mean, I think that would be lovely. I think there'll be others in the queue first. I mean, I think they'd be animating like Chimes of Midnight or the Holy Terror or or Storm Warning or something like that. Would be ahead of the queue. But it'd be a lovely idea.
Yeah. And now going away a little bit from the audio. So you doing your documentaries. What inspired you to do the documentaries for the Series 8 box set?
Oh, right. Okay. So on Series 8, we did 3 new ones. There's loads of our old ones on that, because you've got things like Living with Levine, and we did loads of the making ofs for season 8. But the new stuff is we did the Terence and Me tribute with Frank Skinner, and we did the direct route, which was the 3 directors, Graham Harper, Tim Coombe, and Michael Bryant, going around all the locations of that year. And we did Devil's Weekend with Katie Manning and John Levine going back to Aldbourne. And I guess a big inspiration on that year was, I mean, I love that year. I love season 8. I love the feel of it is so much a blanket to me, is so comfortable. And yet it's also a series full of ideas and full of action. And you've got Joe Grant kind of bouncing in, and the unit family feels fully formed by that point with Captain Yates coming in and Benton coming back. With Devil's End, with Devil's Weekend, we just wanted to pay tribute to Aldbourne. Really, we'd not gone to Aldbourne for the DVD for the making of. So I thought, how could we not? And it's such a beautiful village, and basically the most quintessential Doctor Who location of them all, and the one that you can still go back to, and it's as it was really in terms of that village green. It really hasn't changed at all, gloriously. So we wanted to capture that, and putting John and Katie together. They're 2 such massive characters. I love them both, but they are both in their own glorious ways. They're bonkers and yet lovable and very engaging to watch. I'm going to close the door behind me. So wait one second. I'm just going to close this door. And then with the other ones, direct route, it was more of a case of I thought that we'd done the writers' room with writers talking about a particular season all together in a pub, and I thought, why don't we do something like that with directors? Because particularly with directors, they never kind of used to really work together. They'd always have their own projects and be kept in their own bubbles. And so they wouldn't really know what the other guy was doing, or they might have an idea and be jealous of, oh, he got to go there. I'm in the studio and he got to go there. He got to go to Aldbourne. And I thought actually just to buddy them up together and take them back to those locations and really reflect on each other's work and be surprised at what the other directors had managed to do, or intimidated by a location that the other director had to get to grips with. And particularly with season 8, there's a lot of great locations in that series. You've got Dover Castle and Dungeness for Axos, and and Oldbourne, of course.
Mm.
So that kind of made itself. In that way, you thought, well, this would be lots of fun. 3 crazy days of driving around in a black cab to do that. And then the final one was the Terence tribute, which, is the easiest inspiration in the world, because why wouldn't you want to pay tribute to Terence? And we'd worked with him. I'd worked with him about half a dozen different times over the years, and just thought, I know it's only a year or so on when we pitched it to the family from him passing, but it felt like there was still such a huge outpouring of warmth towards him, and we just got lucky that I kind of suspected that Frank Skinner, I knew he was a fan of that era, and got in touch thinking, Frank will probably say no to this because we don't have the budget, we don't have the time that a proper TV broadcast doc would have. And he said yes, because he just really genuinely loves Doctor Who, and particularly had a real love for Terence. And then amazingly lived over the road from him, which I didn't know when I pitched it, which is the luckiest thing in the world from a story point of view, and gave the whole film its kind of arc really for him. So they all, they kind of, the inspiration was partly that all the making ofs on that season had been done. So I think when we see there's a missing making of on a box set, we kind of feel obliged to fill that gap if we can. And on this case, there were no gaps to fill. So it meant, okay, we need to do something slightly sideways and slightly diagonal, so slightly different. And so we did. And it was a really fun set to work on. It really was.
Did you ever get starstruck when you met like Katie Manning for the first time, and the other cast members and Frank Skinner and that?
I don't think so. I think I tend to, I probably don't enjoy those days as a fan. I should kind of go into them and be like, oh my God, it's Joe Grant. But I think you're so focused on what you have to do, and we're so time limited on these things, that the whole of that Frank Skinner doc, an hour of telly, was shot in 3 days.
Wow.
That 3 days for everything you see in that film. And so it's scheduled to within an inch of its life. And hopefully my job is to make sure it doesn't feel like a stress or a rush to the people in it. But inside my head, I'm going, okay, shit, and trying to plan everything as we're going. So I don't think I have time to be starstruck. And I think contributors would rather you just related to them as a friend and a colleague, rather than being kind of nerding out about it. I think they'd rather you just kind of spoke to them as a human being. So maybe it's good that I'm so busy. It just means I have to be myself and chat to them and talk about what we're doing and where we're doing it. I think occasionally you do have a surreal moment of thinking, that's Tom Baker there telling me a story about Sarah Jane Smith. But normally it's after the person's left. I want it to go so well that I will not allow myself to be like, until it's finished. And I go, Tom's off in his car. He's a very happy man. I'm really happy. Oh, Tom Baker, that's the kind of the moment for me, is because up until that point, I might ruin it with, I might, I might like make Tom angry at me, or Tom might step out and be run over by a bus, and it would be my fault or something. And you just keep thinking of all these things that could happen. So it's lovely. My favorite bit is to know that it worked, and I think we always get lovely feedback from the cast and the crew, and they keep working with us. So we can't be too bad. We can't be too awful.
Yeah, and we being a creative and doing all these, what is it like a nice feeling for you when you get positive feedback from all the fans, like when they were getting the box set through and they were watching them and you saw how happy they were? Did that make you feel happy, or did that just make you feel like you've done a good job?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of creatives saying, "Oh, I don't read the reviews and I don't do it for the fans. I listen. I don't go on Twitter. I'm terrible. I look at everything. I do because we are making these for such a specific audience. Like if you're making a telly show, if you're making Bake Off, then you're making it for loads of different types of people, millions and millions of people from different walks of life. But we are making documentaries for I don't know, like kind of for 50,000 people, for 60,000 people, like for a really targeted amount of people. And if you made it for those people and then they didn't like it, however much I thought I did a good job, I've kind of failed. You know, if it was rejected by that fan base, that's who it's for. And so I do read reviews, and I do look on Twitter, and I do look on the forums, because you've made a film often in a vacuum where only a small number of people really have seen it, and people like yourself and your editor have seen it lots. So you've maybe lost that ability to step back. And I'm always interested to see when people watch it. You know, how did it go down? And I won't get carried away with that. You know, if I read a negative review, I know how to deal with it. I know how to, you know, not let that bother me. It's more about the consensus. It's more about, if the majority of people feel a certain way, you think, yeah, that's good then. And some people, it matters more than others. You know, if we'd made the Sarah Jane, the Liz Sladen tribute, and her daughter Sadie, who's in it, had been very supportive of it. If Sadie had hated it, that would have been really difficult.
Yeah.
You know, it would have been a really, I would have felt like we'd failed if that had been the case. And that's only one person, but it's a very significant person in that context, in that story. So I do look and I do read, and sometimes it changes things. I always say there was a Doctor Who magazine review of Living with Levine when we sent Toby Haydock to spend a weekend with John Levine in Salisbury, back nearly like 10 years ago. And Doctor Who magazine said they thought we'd been a bit snide, I think, and that there was one bit of voiceover that said something like, "I couldn't help but think that John was putting on a bit of a show." And I kind of read this and was like, oh, but then thought, blimey, they've got me there. Actually, they've got me, because they're right. And I'd written some of the voiceover to be like Toby's thoughts, because I didn't quite trust the film to be getting across some of these ideas of maybe what was happening on the surface and what was happening underneath. And I thought they're right. So when we did a weekend with Waterhouse, and Toby went and spent a weekend with Matthew Waterhouse, we didn't do any of that. I kind of said, right, we're not going to do any thoughts. You know, we're not going to have any voiceover. I think the only voiceover in it is literally to say, I arrived at Matthew's house, or, you know, just very basic A to B stuff. And so, you know, sometimes it's good to be open to the feedback and actually think, yeah, if I do that bit, the next thing will be better. But it's also knowing when to say, no, that critique is wrong, that's incorrect, and I will not take that to heart. So it's a tricky balance, it is. But I generally can't help myself. but look.
Yeah. And now, because as well as doing the Series 8 box set or season, we're not going to go into how you pronounce it because it'll probably cause some upset. But from the Series 24 box set, what's your favourite documentary, if you're allowed to say?
I can say. The funny thing is, I've not been quite so involved in the 24 box set, because I was on another BBC job at the same time that it was being made. But the one that I've done for it, which I'm very happy about, is we did one for season 23 called The Doctor's Table, when it was Colin and Nicola and Michael Jaston and Bonnie Langford all having a nice posh dinner. And we had like 5 cameras going at the same time, and they just had lots of champagne and lots of fun and answered silly questions from TARDIS cookie jars. And so I said, let's do that again. Let's do that on season 24. And so we got Sylvester and Sophie Aldred and Bonnie Langford, and we got Clive Merrison, who plays the deputy chief caretaker in Paradise Towers, who's a very funny, witty man. And we just plonked them down at a table. So it's the simplest format in the world, and it's kind of ripping off a few different things off the telly. There's a show on BBC Two called I'll Get This, which is basically the same. It's the same thing, but I think for a Doctor Who format, you really kind of get to know those figures who you're so used to seeing, but maybe you don't know how Sylvester McCoy feels about cannibalism. You know, you don't know if Sylvester McCoy would eat another human being's flesh if it was required. But now, through the magic of this documentary, you will know this, Tom. So it's very silly, but I think you probably get to know them better than you ever have in a way, just by seeing them so informal. And because we shoot it with 5 cameras, so everybody's got, each of the 4 has a close-up, and then we've got a wide shot. So there's never any cheating. There's never us taking a listening shot from somewhere else and putting it in. It's all live, and it's just that we've chopped it down to be a pacey kind of 40 minutes rather than, much longer. And I think to shoot that. That's lovely because I get to shut up. I get to kind of say at the beginning, so this is kind of what I'm after, sort of, here's the tins. And I have my say through what the questions are in the TARDIS cookie jars. It's a bit like the TARDIS tin thing they've done in Doctor Who magazine for years, but the questions are more inspired by the particular season. And then we just let them play and have fun. And I think they get a kick, and really. But that's my favorite one. On season 24, there's also Richard Latto has co-directed, I think, a big feature-length overview called Here's to the Future, I think, which I've not seen yet, but I'm sure will be good. Richard's work's always really good. And Steve Broster's done a making of for Delta and the Bannerman. But the big thing, really, is I think it's the biggest set we've ever had in terms of material, in terms of raw studio footage and behind-the-scenes stuff, and extra kind of interviews that they did at the time. I think it's probably the biggest one there will ever be, in that sense, even more than 23. Wow. And I don't think 25 would have as much publicity material as 24 did for the new Doctor and everything. So it's a big set. And I love the fact that hopefully season 24, which can be quite a Marmite season, I hope that encourages people to look at it afresh, and make a new decision about it.
Yeah. And so now going a little bit away from doing stuff that you've done, if you got the chance to make a Doctor Who spin-off, what Doctor Who spin-off would you make? And would it be in audio or would it be visual?
Oh God, I don't know, Tom. What do I like in Doctor Who that I'd like to see more of? My favourite bits of Doctor Who. I'm a big sucker for kind of early Tom and so on. So I'm just trying to think if there's any particular thread. I mean, maybe you could. I guess even things like Life on Skara, kind of Davros's early years. Big Finish have kind of done that. They did the I Davros stuff, didn't they? So actually, Big Finish have probably nailed most of them. Maybe you could do like a Fenric through the ages or something like that. Maybe, because we get the impression that Fenric's been around for a long, long time in lots of places. If you did the life story of Fenric, and it was him doing awful bad things in different points in human history and different space, that'd be quite fun. I have a really soft spot for well, I do it about the silly bits of Doctor Who as well. I have a real soft spot for the Time Monster and for that university that the master's running at that point. He's pretending to be a professor. So maybe you could do a spin-off that's about a term at that university with the master in charge of a class of students, and it's kind of like, he's secretly getting them to do evil, awful things, but they don't know it. And they're just like, this seems a bit suspect. Do you not think this is a bit evil? Maybe what would it? Like, no, it's lovely. It's going to be, we'll have a nice day out down at the Pharos project or whatever as it's being built. Or I don't know. So no, I don't know. But I guess you'd always think live action is kind of the ultimate, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love animation and I love audio, but it's filmmaking is a visual medium, and actors are amazing. Human faces are amazing. So I'd always think, wouldn't it be great to do some of this stuff for real, for live action? Yeah.
And I was coming from a writer's point of view as an audio. What's your thoughts on the Bessie audio? Because I just think it's a weird concept, because Bessie, like Brum, can't really speak and's never spoken. What's your thoughts on that?
I don't know anything about this. What a Bessie audio?
Yeah, so there's an audio drama about Bessie.
Right. Who did this? Was this like this wasn't a Big Finish thing, was it?
Yeah, it was Big Finish.
Was it?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about this. Well, I would agree with you that I think it'd be difficult. You'd have to do it like Herbie, wouldn't you? You'd have to be about the human cast. I love Bessie as much as the next man, but I think it would be difficult to make it about Bessie.
Yeah.
Because even making something about K9 is hard, and K9 can talk, and think and so on. So, but then we always trying to think: do we ever establish if Bessie has any kind of sentience? It often feels like the Doctor pretends that Bessie does stuff, and he drives her around and says, "Oh, Bessie." Yeah. She's doing it. I'm trying to think if there are any actual moments where it's like the TARDIS. I wouldn't be surprised if Bessie has like a bit of TARDIS crystal or coral or something in her engine that means she's slightly Time Lord, because she's not quite normal, is she, Bessie? Yeah. She's not a normal car. But I was still, I would balk at pitching a story about her purely.
Yeah.
You know.
Well,
But we love filming with it. I mean, we've done a few docs where it's not the actual Bessie is in a museum, beautifully maintained, but not roadworthy. You can't take her out on the road. So we use a chap called Dean Rose, has a beautiful Bessie replica, which is kind of more, in a way, more authentic than the real thing in some ways, because it has those little details like the turbo fast drive thing, and it's got the little hand indicating. So it looks beautiful, and we've taken that out twice now for documentaries. We did one we went back to Derry for the Green Death and drove Bessie around, and we did it again in Oldbourne. So I love Bessie. I think there's something, whenever you see that car, I'm amazed they didn't actually bring it back in the new series, did they?
No.
Like the last time we saw her was in Battlefield, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that Russell or that Stephen in like the 50th wasn't tempted to have Bessie being in the Black Archive or something like that. You know.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it didn't pop up somewhere.
But with Bessie being an actual car, not like you can actually buy these type of cars. What do you think? Would you think that it'll still be road safe to this day? Because I was thinking, as a massive Doctor Who fan, I'd be really interested just to drive down to Tesco's in Bessie, in my own version of Bessie.
Absolutely. Well, you'd get some looks. You know, I think you'd definitely get some attention. I mean, that's a lovely thing with the replica that we use on these documentaries. Genuinely, it's gorgeous seeing it on the street. You know, you wouldn't want to go on a long journey in Bessie. No. Fairly exposed sitting in Bessie. But for a little hop around town, I think it's amazing. And we had a lovely moment when there was a young lad, I think called John. He used to be a young lad. He was a boy when the demons were shot in Oldbourne. And then he came back as a 50-odd-year-old, I guess he would have been mid-50s. And he got to ride around in Bessie for the first time since he was a kid. And so, you know, I think there's something magic about Bessie that I love the Whomobile too, but the Whomobile is not quite as charming as Bessie. I think something about Bessie that's quintessentially whimsical in that Doctor Who-y way. But I'll stick to that idea that there's probably a bit of the TARDIS that the Doctor farmed out into Bessie to give her a little bit of sentience or something like that.
Yeah. Now, one thing that my fans out there, well, if I've got any fans out there would want to know,
we've all got fans, Tom.
Is what like tips or advice would you give to budding audio drama writers or like documentary filmmakers? Yeah,
I think the important thing is to find ways of telling stories. Now, it doesn't necessarily, you may not have access to your chosen medium straight away, depending on what it is. If your dream is to become like a feature movie drama director, you don't have access immediately to a big feature movie budget, and you may not have access to actors. You may be somebody who just thinks all I've got is me and my voice or whatever. I just think I would say take every opportunity you can to tell stories, and to tell them in a way that isn't just for you, that is something that can be seen or heard. So for me, it was theatre. For me, it was, I had no desire really to go into theatre, but it was a great way to tell stories. And so I got involved. I grew up with a stammer, and one of my big ways out of it was getting involved in the theatre group at school and getting up on stage and acting, not very well, but doing it as a challenge. And then at uni, I started writing plays and sketches. We used to do sketch shows, and we took shows to the Edinburgh Fringe as like 19, 20-year-olds. And probably objectively, they weren't very good, but we had an absolute blast making them. And I met a lot of friends who were on a similar wavelength about that. And it was really that kind of stuff that led to me writing my first short films. And initially I was working for a telly company, and we were making them for kind of corporate clients. You know, I made a film called The Conquerors, but with a K, Conquerors, which is about a school where conquer fighting's been banned, and it's gone underground into like a Fight Club style, like awful mayhem going on in the school basement. And that was made for a corporate client who wanted to make an anti-bullying film to show in schools. And we were like, hey, we can kind of hijack this and have a budget and do something mad that we would enjoy. And kind of we felt if we enjoyed it, kids would enjoy it, because we were only like 20, 23, 24 at the time. And it was films like that I was able to show to the BBC to say, let me do Doctor Who documentaries. I know this is not a Doctor Who documentary, but this should give you some idea of our legitimacy and that I can do this. So I just think take every opportunity. And you guys have got something that I didn't have, in that my friends and I, we would grab a mate's home movie camera and we would sometimes make little films when we were teenagers, and we didn't have any edit software, so we would just film them and edit them live. So everything would be a first take. And so we'd literally get the take or something, and they would be like, okay, and the edit is there, so then here's the next shot, and we would do it in camera, essentially. And now you've got this amazing showcase in YouTube in particular, that, you know, I'm not blind. I know that there must be millions of creators who make stuff for YouTube and toil away, and it never gets seen, and maybe there's disappointment there. But occasionally something on YouTube will take off and get somebody a name, and suddenly from nothing you might be out there to the world, and that's a platform that we really didn't have 20 years ago, and it's a great platform. And maybe the same goes for audio drama, you know, and that there are apps and websites that you can work on your own and then get them heard. The main thing is to get it out there, and not to just sit on it and think, I've written something, but I don't think anybody's ever going to want to see it or hear it. You need to find a way of actually making your thing, and otherwise it doesn't really exist. It doesn't really count until you can present it to other people in some way. And even if the first thing doesn't give you what you wanted, it will be the start of your journey that maybe in 5-10 years time will get you to where you want to be.
Yeah, and that's very, very, because a lot of people that now are fans, as you say, use YouTube. A lot of them are creating their own audio dramas and fan films, and bits and bobs are looking really incredible. And have you heard any of the fan audio dramas?
I'll be honest and say I probably haven't. I've bumped into fan films and so on from over the years, because in some way, you know, people have been making these things since the early 80s, and a kind of, or if not before. So there's a pedigree to these things that has always been part of Doctor Who. And there's a whole audio series from the early 80s where my friend Richard Marson, who was like producer on Blue Peter for years and wrote the John Nathan Turner book, he plays a Doctor Who companion, I think, alongside Gary Russell, or maybe Gary produced it, as they were just fans. They weren't doing it to be on telly or on the radio. So I've bumped into a few things over the years, but not so much as I'd like, in a way, because I'm even behind with Big Finish stuff, you know, like massively behind with Big Finish stuff. So it's hard to keep track, but I'm aware that it's there. I'm very, you know, it's nice to see that people are, I like the idea that Doctor Who inspires people to write their own stuff, you know. I think fan fiction is a great offshoot of a show like Doctor Who, that it inspires imagination, just like me writing sequels to Fenric in my exercise book, you know.
Yeah, and a lot of fans now, because they're inspired by the show, they go off and create their own. So there's really popular ones, as I can't remember the name of the series, but it's a YouTuber called Miles Taylor was probably one of the first fan audios I'd ever seen, where he made his own Doctor, his own universe, and he could do what he wanted, and he got the inspiration from it. And I think these type of people will end up working at places like Big Finish, because they're all incredible. But at the moment, I think it was like the other day, you were saying that you were writing a new audio drama for Big Finish. It's your 10th one out the list, and I have a few of ones that you've written.
Which ones you got, though?
Well, I've got the Memory Bank.
Yes. That's the first. That's the very first.
Yeah. Warzone.
Yes, with Peter. Lovely.
Yeah. Iron Bright.
Very good.
And then I have, of course, the middle. Now, if you are allowed to say anything, what's the idea about the new one, if you're allowed to say anything?
I can't really say anything. I'm writing at the moment. I think we're going to get another appearance, actually. Oh, no, she can't quite get through the door. That's awful, isn't it? Can you hear the screaming? Can you hear the screaming, Tom, in my house? It's my daughter outside the door. She'll be fine. She'll be fine. So I can't really say that much. It's as I think I put on Twitter. It's a Doctor Who story. It's part of, obviously with Big Finish, they've changed the shape of the range now. That you had the main range before of Colin and Peter and Sylvester as its own thing, and now everything's splintered off into its own box sets. Is the idea. So there'll be a Colin box set of a few stories, followed by a Peter box set of a few stories, and they've all got their own production teams, you know. And so I'm working on a story within one of those box sets, which I think is due out in the next couple of years, and is a properly time hoppy one, which I haven't really done before. I'm used to kind of thinking, what would be an interesting location for a Doctor Who story, and setting everything within one place, like Formikia in the middle, and trying to build that world. And this one is very much, we're going to go here and now here and now here and now here, and it's an interesting challenge, because you don't want it to be too flippant about that. You don't want it to be too. I love The Chase, for instance, but you know, there's a flippancy to a story like The Chase when they're planet and time hopping, that you think, I want to make sure I don't go too tongue-in-cheek with it, that I want it to still resonate. So that one, I've finished the first draft of episode 1. As ever, my first drafts tend to be pretty rubbish, but it's good to have the kind of structure of the house up, and now I can start to build the walls of the house and put the roof on it and fill it with furniture, and then but before I do that, I'll do the first draft of episode 2 next week, and then a circle round, and it's good. I mean, I find it very much a tonic if you've been out making documentaries where you're kind of trying to piece together something real, and you're trying to, you know, you don't want to tell people what to say. You want to try and put people in a situation where they can give you their best stuff, and it feels natural. But then it's nice with an audio drama that you can just say, no, I will literally make this character say this thing. I will not pussyfoot around it. I'm literally a fascist on a keyboard saying, you will do this character. And that can be quite nice at that moment when you've been maybe pussyfooting around a little bit beforehand. So no, that one, there's that one, and then there's still there are 2 that haven't been released that are due to be released. So there's a Tom Baker one called The Friendly Invasion that I've written, which is set in World War. I don't know if they've put the synopsis out, but it's kind of a World War II one. I tend to go back to World War II quite a bit. Weirdly inspired by Oldbourne, but I won't say anything more than that. Like the real world Oldbourne is kind of the inspiration for it. And then the other one has been announced, is a Colin Baker one called Elevation, which is part of a box set they're doing about the 11, who's if anybody's not heard it, he's the renegade Time Lord, who all of his 11 incarnations kind of live in him vocally at the same time. So he switches between incarnations verbally. So he's crazy. He's a lunatic. But this is a story all about the 11 getting involved in a world that feels a bit more connected to him. You know, he has a bit more empathy with, and the Doctor kind of circling around. It's quite nice where the Doctor's he's in the first and the third story, but he's not in the second story. So it is the 11 as the main character, with the Doctor popping into it, which has been quite nice to write. But I think that's out in November. I could be wrong. It's certainly later this year.
Yeah. And with you writing all these audio dramas, how did you come up with a title? Because titles seem to be the hardest thing to come up with.
Yeah. It really varies, you know. Sometimes it just happens really quickly. Like the memory bank was literally I think with the memory bank, it sounds stupid. I had a dream, literally a dream about the core plot of the memory bank, of this idea of a big cathedral-like space, which is filled with all the pictures and film of people's memories, and which is being held together by one person who's having to remember everybody in this world to keep them alive. And that was and literally it was always called the memory bank, because that was the pun. It was, we are within the memory bank, and it is a memory bank, and so on. With Einbright, for instance, you know, that was just a very lucky from the research. You read it up and you thought, I think it's the German. Isambard is kind of Germanic for Einbright. So Isambard Kingdom Brunel Isambard means iron bright. And so you're like, oh, I've not heard that. That's quite a nice ring to it. And maybe it says something about the potential of the man. And that's kind of what the story was about, was seeing somebody who achieved something immense when they were kind of in their early 20s and feeling quite disillusioned and lost. But then other ones, like the middle, I think, was called something. What was the middle called? The middle was called, at one point it was called War of the Ages, and at another point it was called, oh Christ, okay, it was called like the Silver Army or something like that, or the Grey Army, I think it was called at one point. And we just couldn't decide on a name for it. I think it was Nick, because I had the middle in the story, and the middleman was in the story, and Nick Briggs, I think, said, why don't we just call it the middle? And I think it appealed to them that it was part of a trilogy, and it was the middle act of that trilogy. And then something like Warzone. Warzone was a pitch. Well, Warzone was a brief from Scott Hancock and Guy Adams, where they kind of said, we'd like you to write this because you know all about running, don't you? Because I do marathons and races and stuff, and they said, can you write this because we think it should be about running culture? And it was, they gave me like a paragraph or so of the kind of core, which I thought, actually, this is interesting, because this is kind of what Russell T Davies would do to his writers on Doctor Who, that he would often give them a little chunk of, I kind of want it to be about this, and you go, okay, well, how do I make that? And with that one they said, call it Warzone. I think I suggested we should call it like Personal Best or PB, because those themes kind of come into it. And I thought, without ruining it too much for anybody who's not heard it, Personal Best, it becomes a metaphor for the way that people are being changed in an awful way within the story. But they thought it might set us up for reviewers. If reviewers hated it, they'd be like, "This is not a personal best." You don't want to put anything in the title that suggests that the story is any good, because it will be used against you in some way. So I think it varies. I think sometimes you lock upon a phrase or a word in the writing of it that you think, well, of course it has to be called that. That's just the only thing it could be called. And other times you're slightly into. We never get to do the something of something really anymore, do we? I know I joked on Twitter that I think I put the new story being the something of something, but you never have the guts to do like the horror of Fang Rock or something like that now. But those are the quintessential Doctor Who titles, the Terror of the Autons, the Planet of Evil, and actually we're always trying to come up with cleverer ones now. All I really want to write is the Planet of Evil. That would be the crowning achievement.
And now coming to the end of the interview, people will want to know, and surely I want to know, what software do you use to write your scripts?
Somebody asked this the other day. I'm very basic. I have used things like Final Draft before, and I just find them all a bit fiddly and annoying, and you have to pay for money for them at least at some point. And so I just use Word because I just like using Word, and I find it very familiar because I've used it for years, like we all have. And so there's very much a Big Finish format that they will send you an example script, and it will say, this is how you do kind of stage directions, if you like, or kind of this is how you do audio, this is how you do dialogue, this is how you do page breaks and all that kind of thing. And so you stick to that. But I just do it on Word because I just think it should be something you're comfortable with, and don't let that kind of snobbishness of, oh, what do you use? Are you using this? Or I don't like that. I don't think it really matters with a script as long as you deliver it in the way that they're asking for it, as long as you give them it in the right way. But I think mostly I've never had them tell me off for using Word, so I'm just going to keep on using it.
Yeah.
And then for editing, editing it varies more. We used to use Final Cut Pro back in the day, and then we went to Avid, and I still use Avid a lot, but we use Premiere now for a lot of the Doctor Who editing. Weirdly, Avid tends to still be the standard on telly. So if I'm working for the Natural History Unit or something, then it will be usually an Avid edit, even though Premiere is probably a more user-friendly, smoother system these days.
Because I use Premiere to edit my videos, and I feel like since I got this computer, earlier this year, I've learned more of the shortcuts. So once you know the shortcuts, you can do something like second, you're doing that, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, woo! woo, and you've done it in seconds, and you can make something look impressive because you know what you're doing. And for audios, what software do you use to edit them if you're ever involved in that part?
See, I never have to do that bit because I very much Big Finish do a great job on the production of those audios and on all of the effects and the music and everything that goes into them. I have no desire to get involved in that side of things because I quite like with Big Finish that I can be just a writer. Like normally, if I'm making films, I'm having to do a bit of everything, and I'm very involved in the edit, and I'm writing, and I'm filming, and I'm literally holding the camera and getting the shots. So I'm everywhere, and it's exhausting. And so I like with Big Finish that I can just say, I am going to write you a script, and now here is the script, and I'm going to run off now, bye, and then maybe pop back to come to the recording day, purely as a fan, really, purely as just somebody listening in the background and occasionally going, oh, I think you'll find it's pronounced Formica or whatever in the background. But I tend to not then get involved at all after that. I don't think I ever have. And so when you hear it for the first time, you don't get advance. I think because everybody's working up until the deadline, you don't get to hear the releases before they come out.
Yeah.
So I hear it when you hear it. You know, I download it on the day it's out, and suddenly, you know, you got an idea from the recording day how the performances went, and but you suddenly got all this amazing music and effects on top of it, and you feel. I mean, and that's the thing. I think Big Finish, they're good at lots of things, but they're amazing at really turning an audio drama into something super vivid and exciting. So I love that, and certainly something like Warzone in particular has amazing post-production on it. The music in Warzone and the effects. I thought you have elevated the script, which is, you know, just all right script, but it's really elevated by what they did to it afterwards. It really puts you into that space and makes you feel like actually I'm kind of just watching an episode of Doctor Who, but with the brightness turned all the way down, you know, with no visual at all.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on to this interview / podcast / whatever else it turned out to be.
No problem, Tom. My pleasure. Been lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, and I hope you guys at home enjoyed this wonderful interview. There'll be more interviews coming soon, so keep your eyes peeled. As I said before, keep your eyes peeled on the main channel and the third channel and the ninth channel. Fingers crossed. But hope you enjoyed this video. It's me, Time Lord Tom out. Bye.
Bye.